Hey out there, this is Saturday, August 9th, 2014. I'm in Santa Cruz, California on the campus of the UCSC, University of California, Santa Cruz. It's still kind of foggy out. This is pretty typical of this time of year. It's starting to clear up, it looks like, out toward the ocean here. Still pretty socked in. Still out here on the UCSC campus, just a different location. It's a sprawling campus. It's about 11 o'clock a.m. Pacific Coast time right now. And you can see the clouds starting to break up out here. It's kind of getting nice. This is a sprawling campus that probably includes tens of thousands of acres. This is just one small section of it. Over here in the distance, there's this tower. I don't know what it is. It might be a PA system. And in the distance there, you can see some kind of a farm project, agricultural. And it's really hard to see any ocean, but if it was clearer out there, the ocean is right out there is the ocean. You'd be able to see it. Today I wanted to mention that my dad passed away very early Tuesday morning. He was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer about 6-8 months ago, I guess it was, and I guess he did pretty good, all things told. And he had been struggling with multiple sclerosis most all his life. He got into nutrition, taking care of his health, and attributes that to his longevity, because most multiple sclerosis patients do not live all that long. They don't live a normal lifespan on average. He blames his multiple sclerosis from having a poor diet as a teenager, as a child. Coca-Cola and hot dogs, that sort of thing, I guess he was brought up on. And one could probably understand how eating such foods would induce diseases of one sort or another. But anyhow, I did want to talk a little about my dad and honor him, because he was a good dad. And we were probably about as close as any dad and son can get, I guess. And we loved each other. We had our ins and outs. It never got too physical, but it came close a couple of times. I think every son out there feels a duty at some point to call their dads out on the carpet, and when they disagree, and there's a period of time they can't shrink away from that disagreement, they feel compelled to bring it to their dad's attention. A character defect, personality disorder, whatever it may be. But it's not only parents that teach, it's parents and children. Children teach their parents as well. I've learned a heck of a lot from my kids. I have a lot more humility since I've had kids. They have a way of doing that. But toward the end, I learned to really understand what he had been going through his whole life, because multiple sclerosis is a disease of the central nervous system. It affects the spinal cord, and of course all these things interrelate with the brain function. So he struggled with, I guess you would say, a hot temper. He was always kind of edgy, But he learned to love, and this is what was most critical for him to share with others, is that he found that loving was the most important thing we could ever learn. And I happen to agree with him. I don't know how he arrived at his understanding of that fact, but I also agree from a biblical perspective that this is the most important thing any of us can ever learn, is to learn to love, and that includes ourselves too. And we all need grace and mercy and forgiveness. We all have fear and insecurity, and we need to rely on a higher power. And it's fine with God if you want to call God love. And I like to think of God as definitely a loving being, all loving, and but encompassing every single good quality, characteristic, and attribute. But as far as a biblical perspective goes, it would go back to Jesus teaching that there was 2 commandments now that superseded all the commandments. That if we could just do those 2 things, the law, the entire law that's written in the Bible, and everything the prophets taught could be summed up in just loving God above all else as the rightful source, the responsible party for everything good that you've ever enjoyed, that are enjoying today, or ever will enjoy. That all good things come from God, and this is the only one we should pay homage and deference to and have reverence for. It should not be a man, and it should not be money, and it should not be materialism. It should be above all just this awesome, wondrous, miraculous, mysterious force for good. I like to refer to as our divine parents. I think it's apropos because it makes sense, since we're created in the image and likeness of God, that we have parents, and so that God is like our parents, because it just, to me, it's rational and reasonable. In fact, biblically speaking, there's a good reason, and that is the first chapter of the Bible, setting straight the character of God, and being that God is 2 yet 1, and that God is male, and clearly female, but the 2 are not independent of each other. They are needed by each other to be that whole, good, and perfect unit. And this is what they want. It's by their own free will that they have this union, this eternal union of creation, procreation, and expanding creation, and enjoyment. And, certainly God gets entertainment out of watching the affairs of men, and it just all makes sense. It's just like a parent gets entertainment out of watching the affairs of their children. They want to know, how they're doing at work, and, how things are at home, and, how things are on the lover front or whatever. And so it makes sense that our divine parents care like our natural parents do. And for those that never had parents that stayed by them, in other words, foster children, I think there's foster parents out there that are probably far better in many ways than many biological or natural born parents. And probably because they care, they want to be the parent, and they want a child, they want that relationship. When so many naturally born parents and children relationship, for some of these people it was incidental, it was an accident. I really didn't care if I ever had kids, this sort of attitude. But when they came, they felt that was a blessing, and so it all turned out good. But anyhow, the second commandment that he said that was imperative to follow was to love one another. That's it. Just to love each other as we love ourselves. And of course, this entails honesty. And if we are really doing that, if everybody on earth was treating the person next to them on each side and in front and in back, all around this planet, we could have peace and harmony, contentment, joy, prosperity, safety, security for every single person on earth. And this is what would make God happy. And this, as a parent, I can tell you, that would make me very happy to have that kind of a reality, that kind of a society. And that's why I do these videos, is because I want to at least be on record, even if nobody ever listened to me. At least I want to be on record with my beliefs. But I feel that above and beyond that, I do have something to share, because I've asked for accurate information, accurate knowledge. I've asked for wisdom and understanding. I want to know the truth. I want to get to the bottom of things. I want to keep things simple too. I don't want things convoluted. I want to say, does this make sense or doesn't it? You know, is this logical or isn't it? Is this rational and reasonable or isn't it? And that's what I ask about this system all the time. And I found out that it isn't, you know. But I wanted to, before I get on to another subject, I wanted to talk about my dad a little more, and a couple of things that I always stuck with me from a young child. And I was brought up here in Santa Cruz. We moved here when I was 6 years old. I was born in Los Angeles, in North Hollywood, at the Queen of Angels Hospital in 1958. And then we lived in the vicinity. I lived in Manhattan Beach. We moved to Florida. This was after the assassination of JFK in 1963. My dad was really disgruntled about that whole thing, and he ended up writing a book a couple of years later entitled Apple Pie. It was a satire of the United States government. He had been in the Marine Corps, and he knew probably more than the average person. And he wrote some very controversial things for his time regarding J. Edgar Hoover. And anyhow, the book was actually very popular. This was during the beginning of the Vietnam War era, 1964. I guess his book probably came out in 65, 66. And it sold real well. He spoke on a radio or television talk show once, and a popular talk show at the time, and turned out the book sold really well, millions of copies purportedly, but it was mysteriously yanked off the shelves, and I guess it was censored. It was a little too controversial. It struck a chord maybe with some high-powered folk, let's say. So anyhow, I lived in Inglewood, Florida, which is near Sarasota. We had a house right on the ocean. Porpoises jumping around in the front yard. I had pet these horseshoe fish, and I don't know, I had horseshoe crabs, but I also had the little fish, the little horse fish. I can't remember their name, but there was manta rays swimming around in the lagoon out, and we had 50 palm trees in this yard. For a 5-year-old, this was paradise. 1963, 64. For whatever reason, family wasn't happy in Florida, a lot of mosquitoes. And we ended up moving back to California, and we moved to Santa Cruz, right here in Santa Cruz. And I remember we bought a house in 1966. My folks paid $8,000 for the house, and it was an arm's length transaction. In other words, that wasn't a foreclosure or anything. It's when minimum wage was probably about $1.45, $1.55 in 1966, I guess. So one person in a household working on any job at all, minimum wage job, could earn sufficient money above and beyond what they needed to make their mortgage payment on their house and support the entire family. That's the America that I remember, and it really hurts me to see what's happened in this country. But anyhow, one of the poems my dad taught me, I can only remember the really short ones, was that life is so full of such a number of things, we should all be as happy as kings. And I liked it for its simplicity, and I liked it because I liked that feeling of happiness, of joy, and contentment. And so it always stuck with me, and I really thank my dad, because to a large degree I think that I embraced his values, and he was not a materialistic fellow, and he had a whole slew of friends and acquaintances that he'd meet maybe once, but they really enjoyed his company, and so they made a point to make sure and get to see him again and spend time with him. So we'll be having his memorial sometime at the end